What's up guys, my name is Liam and today we're going to be taking a look at the Monsgeek M1W-SP. This is a 75% Hall effect gaming keyboard. It does come with an 8000 Hz polling rate out of the box when using it wired. You can also use this wirelessly, but only does have the 1000 Hz polling rate when doing so. So is this going to be the perfect gaming keyboard for you? Let's check it out. And before we get started today, I did want to let you know that this was sent out to me. However, everything you're going to be hearing in this video is going to be my own words and my own opinions. Included inside the box, it does have this sticker here for doing a tape mod. It also does have these little pads down here if you wanted to do the force break mod as well. Here is the switch puller. And then you do have a keycap puller. It does come with a coiled USB-C cable, though this is a little bit shorter. I kind of have my computer down on the floor from my desk, so it doesn't really reach without stretching that out a lot. And then here is the 1K receiver if you plan on using this keyboard in wireless mode. And here's a look of the layout of the keyboard itself. It does have these shine through PBT keycaps, and they are shine through up here in the front. I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel about this at first since I've never used these front facing shine through keycaps, but honestly I really do enjoy them a lot and I do prefer them. The volume knob does feel good. The function of the volume knob, when you press it, it does not mute your sound. It switches between two modes, so you can switch between either controlling the volume on your system, and if you're to press it again, it'll actually control the lighting on the keyboard so you can dim it and turn it on or off. But I'm a big fan of the overall layout of this. On the sides, it does have these gold sidebars, and we'll open this up in a minute so you can take a look at that. The USB-C connectivity is up here in the top left side, which is where I do prefer it to be. And I really do like the front lip on this keyboard itself. And the height on the front of this is very comfortable for me as well. It's sitting right around 21 millimeters in thickness, so I don't feel like it sits up too high or anything like that to where it bothers me while I'm using it in game or throughout the day. On the back, a very simplistic design. It does have these 4 feet up in each corner, and then here are the holes to open this up in case you wanted to mod it or do anything to the internals. I have been getting asked how this stacks up against the ACO, the limited edition Year of the Dragon keyboard. They are very similar to one another, but I must say that I do feel like there's a slight difference with using this Monsgeek keyboard. I was going back and forth and testing them out, and though these are both gasket mounted, the internals are just a little bit different, but I must say that all around that as I was going back and forth A and B testing them, the ACO keyboard, it does have a little bit more flex to it and bend to it when you're pressing on the keys, where this one overall to me just feels like it's a little bit more stable and a little bit more stiff. So at the end of the day, it just really comes down to your personal preference. For me, I've been kind of preferring this Monsgeek. I kind of like the stiffer feeling of it a little bit more, especially when I am gaming. And I also have been really enjoying this minimalistic design, and especially the shine through keycaps are a big deal for me personally. As I first got this out of the box and started using it, I was really confused on where the switch was to actually use the wireless mode. So something I kind of wish that they could change perhaps in the future. In order to access the switch, you actually do have to remove the caps keycap, and you'll find the switch right here. So it does have 3 modes. If you have it switched in the very middle, this is where it enables the wired mode to give you the 8K polling rate. As you switch the switch in the upward position, this does turn it on, but this is what you would use if you're using this on a Mac. Oddly enough, I was testing this out on my Windows PC and it still did work in this mode. However, I would recommend using the Windows mode, and you would actually enable that by switching the switch down. And this does have a 6000 milliamp hour battery in it. The estimated use time on this, if you're using this with the LED backlighting on, you're estimated to get around 32 hours of use. It makes a huge difference if you do turn that backlighting off. You get an estimated 600 hours of use in this in wireless mode without the LED backlighting. The keycaps that this comes included with, they are double shot PPT, and they feel great. There is a slight bit of texture on the surface of them, but overall it does have a smoother feeling to the touch. This comes included with their cream yellow magnetic switches. I've already talked about these before. They do have this single rail design in here. So the springs that come included, they are a little bit on the stiffer end. So if you're comparing it something to like the Wooting that has an initial force of around 40 grams and a bottom out of 60. These, like I said, they feel a little bit more stiff, and the initial actuation force on these is around 50 grams with a bottom out of around 58, but they do come pre-lubed, both the switches and the stabilizers. And a quick look at the bottom, there is a hole in the bottom of the switch, but it does not have the two stabilizers on the left and right side like the Gateron switches do. The top plate comes off nice and easily once you do remove these 6 screws at the bottom. This is a completely solid aluminum piece, no type of bending or anything like that, so it feels very premium. Right underneath that, here we do have the aluminum tray with the switches in it. If you want to see a close-up really quick of what underneath these switches looks like, there you go, with the stabilizers being this purple color. So same thing that we saw in the Acco Year of the Dragon with these silicone style dampeners on where it actually does get mounted. Right underneath that, you do have a piece of pour-on foam that is on the thicker end, possibly around 4 millimeters in thickness, I would imagine. And then here is a look of what the PCB looks like. Here's a close-up look of what the volume knob looks like. It does have a smoother finish on the outside. And right underneath that, you do have this piece of pour-on foam. I do believe this sits at 3 millimeters in thickness. Underneath the pour-on foam, you do have this white sheet here. And I could be mistaken, but I do believe this is to protect from the battery, because underneath that, here is the base itself with the 6,000 milliamp hour battery. You can remove these little gold accents on the side. So it would be kind of cool if they did offer different colors of this. I would probably like to have a silver one to put in here to kind of match the keyboard. Although I do think this gold does look really cool. But again, just all around, this base is just one absolutely solid piece. And this keyboard does feel pretty heavy and really solid and durable all around. So a great construction. Jumping into the software, it is similar to the Acco software, but the layout is different. Starting over here at the top left, you do have your main tab. This is where you can remap keys if you choose to do so. And next up is probably the most important tab for getting your keyboard set up. There is some presets here for comfort, sensitive. There's even a gaming setting right here. For me, I like to use this custom setting, and what I typically do is I'll go over the settings here for you really quick. So first thing you can do is when you do set all these settings right here, usually this is turned off, so I'll show you what that looks like. If you were to press the switch, this is where it would activate on the press, and this would control the release. If you want to do like the continuous form of rapid trigger, you will need to enable these settings over here. So when you do make these adjustments, it's going to impact all the keys over here on the keyboard. Unfortunately, with the software, if you wanted to individually tune keys, you can do so, but this does not allow you to select multiple keys. You can only select one key at a time. So hopefully they will update that in the future to make that a little bit more easier to use. But my settings that I like to use, making everything as fast as possible, I do like the 0.1 millimeter on the press. I also do like the 0.1 millimeter on the repress. Here is the release. Now, typically I would play at a 0.1 millimeter. With this keyboard, it just was not possible. There were several times where the movement was not registering. I was holding like W to move forward. It would just randomly stop at times. It seemed like it was always messing up my movement. Adjusting this to 0.2, I didn't have any issues, and honestly playing at these settings for me, trying to get the most responsive keyboard possible, these settings work perfectly. I didn't have any issues the entire time that I was using this setup. Of course, you shouldn't just copy my setup. You should really try and fine tune everything on this keyboard to match how you play with your settings and stuff like that. But this was what seemed to work best for me. But for the custom activation on the initial press, it does allow you to go from 0.1 millimeter. You can adjust in 0.1 millimeter increments all the way down to 4 millimeters. And as far as the rapid trigger goes, it allows you to adjust as low as 0.1 millimeter, and the maximum is 2.5 millimeters. And when you are done making all the adjustments to your switches and you got them set how you want them to be, hit the confirm button down here to make sure that it saves and it configures to the keyboard. They do also have this dead zone setting down here that you can come in here and manually set yourself. And here is a simulation if you wanted to run it on the press of any of your switches. Next up, we have the dynamic keystroke option. This allows you to do multiple commands on the single press of a switch. For example, if you wanted to do at 0.7 millimeters, have it run, and then at 3.5 millimeters, have it crouch so you can do some type of a slide or something like that. It does give you the ability to do that. You can adjust the initial press right here, sensitivity, all the way down to 2.5 millimeters. And it does not allow you to adjust the 3.5 millimeters, but it does allow you to readjust this coming up over here on the release. Next up, we have this roar setting here. And what this is supposed to do is this is supposed to give you a lower latency. I did play around with this quite a bit on the Acco Year of the Dragon. This function was kind of glitchy for me, especially when I was running the test. I do want to say that with this MW1E, the Monsgeek version, it does seem to be using a later version of a firmware, and everything's running a lot smoother to me. So I have been actually using this quite a bit. Having WASD as my most sensitive and fastest responding key inputs. I do want to say that in all honesty, I don't notice any type of a real world difference whether I have these on or off. So, I mean, obviously you want to get the lowest latency possible, so I've just been leaving them on. So hopefully in the future, they will be able to implement this across all their keys, but it's at least cool that they do have this feature for now. And then over here on the other settings tab is where you can just adjust some settings for your wireless mode. So this is the base of the main settings. Over here next up, you do have your functions where you can adjust all your function keys when you press the function button. This does give you macro settings. Lighting is very straightforward and simple as well. You do have a bunch of presets. I usually just stick to the always on, and it does allow you to adjust the brightness down here, change the color, stuff like that. And then there's this share tab down here as well, where it allows you to either upload presets or download presets from other users. So I do feel like this is kind of a cool option. And then finally you have this My Account setting and this About setting. The About settings where you come in here and make sure that you do check that the latest app version and the latest firmware is installed. So that about wraps things up on the software. And though I do like the software, I feel like it has just about all the settings in it that I like using. I do kind of wish that it was a little bit more straightforward. This can be a little bit more confusing for first-time users. For the performance with this, I was messing around with my slow motion camera to see what kind of real-world results that I was getting. And I do want to put out a quick disclaimer when viewing the results of this test. There are many different varying factors that can actually alter the results of the test, so don't take this too seriously. I do try and measure this and line these up as accurately as I possibly can, just to try and get some type of an idea on where things are sitting. When it comes to the latency of the wireless versus the wired mode, a couple things that I did notice. First off, when you actually do press the switch in, your first initial movement, I do feel like there is a noticeable difference there in the performance. It does feel a little bit quicker and snappier when you have this in wired mode. The one interesting thing, however, is if you're already pressing on the switch, once you do release it, the latency is not even really noticeable at that point to me. In fact, it was not only feeling about as responsive as when I was using this in the wired mode, but sometimes I found even in my testing results that releasing the switch seemed to be almost a little bit quicker in the wireless mode. The issue where I did have the release on the 0.1 millimeter when using the wireless mode, it did seem to bug out a little bit more and seem a little bit more harsh to use, where it would just randomly just stop sensing inputs in my keyboard as I was walking around or doing any type of movement in a battle. But once I did set it to that 0.2 millimeters in the wireless mode, it did seem to correct the issue. But if you are going to be using this keyboard for any type of competitive gaming, like I said, I did notice a difference going back and forth from wired to wireless mode, so I would recommend just leaving this in wired mode to get that 8K performance. But even when I was stacking this up against the Wooting to see how the 8K performance was going to fare against the Wooting 60HE, only having that 1K, it does look like there still is some room for improvement here. There are more factors that go into the overall latency of the board compared to just the actual polling rate itself. Though this did feel really good and it kind of fell right in line with the Wooting. The Wooting still is kind of holding the top when it comes to the overall performance. But I must say that really using these side by side, going back and forth between this and the Wooting, I didn't really notice an issue to where I felt a major type of a difference, to where I felt like I was missing out in any type of the competitive gameplay that I was doing. So these really felt similar to one another in the overall performance, and they didn't stand that far apart from one another. I've already mentioned in previous videos that you don't notice latency the same way on a keyboard as you do with a gaming mouse. So in terms of movement for me, of course, it's going to vary depending on what you're playing, but I haven't noticed it being that much of a difference. All right, guys, so that about wraps things up on the Monsgeek M1W-SP. I can comfortably say that for the time being, with the overall layout, design, the aesthetic of this, the feeling of this, not just when I'm gaming, but as I'm using this in my day-to-day activities, that this is probably my favorite contender that is currently on the market, having the 75% layout, the overall build of this, everything about it just feels really great to me. And as I'd mentioned, when I'm using this in game, I was kind of going back and A/B testing this, to the Wooting 60HE. Obviously, if you prefer the smaller form factor, the Wooting HE is still going to be the king of these out there. But if you're looking for a great all-around board, everything about this kind of falls right in line with what I'm looking for as far as options go, the feeling, and the performance. So I think that Monsgeek has done just an incredible job with this board, and I plan on putting this back on my desk right when I'm done with this review. All right, guys, so if you have any questions or feel like I left anything out, please let me know down in the comments below. If you're interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. And thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.